So let's talk about a force that has completely reshaped our world: political modernization. You can think of it as the engine that takes a society from, say, an ancient kingdom and transforms it into a modern nation. And honestly, if you want to understand how our world works today, you've got to understand this.
Yeah, this is really the huge question at the heart of it all. How do you get from a world of old traditions, of local loyalties to your tribe or your village, to a world of centralized governments, national identities, and millions of people voting? It's a massive journey, and pretty much every country on Earth has either taken it or is on that path right now.
So to really unpack all this, here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics. What are we even talking about when we say modernization? Then we're going to zoom out and look at the massive scale of this change before breaking it down into 4 key parts. We'll see what it actually looks like in practice, and then we'll wrap up by asking why this whole idea is maybe more relevant today than ever before.
Okay, so first things first. To really get a handle on this, we've got to start with the thinkers who first tried to define this powerful process.
David Apter really sets the stage for us. See, for him, it's not just about politics. Political change is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Modernization is this huge wave that also transforms the economy, how society is structured, and even the way people think about the world.
Then you have Claude E. Welch, who adds this other crucial idea, rationality. He saw modernization as this deliberate process. It's about a society consciously deciding to use its resources, its people, its technology, its money, in the most efficient, logical way possible to build a modern state. It's a shift from just doing things the way they've always been done to strategic, goal-oriented thinking.
And Daniel Lerner just boils it all down to its absolute essence. For him, modernization is simply what happens when rational change starts to replace traditional ways of life. So you see the theme here, right? Across all these definitions, you see this massive pivot away from "this is how we've always done it" to "what is the smartest, most effective way to get this done."
And this brings us to a really important distinction we need to make. You might hear the term political development. Well, that's kind of like taking a snapshot. It asks, how stable and effective is a country's government right now? But political modernization, well, that's the whole movie. It's the epic story of how a society gets there. It's this dynamic, unstoppable process that changes everything from government buildings to what's going on inside a citizen's head. And when we say this is a huge change, we mean it. This isn't about a few small tweaks here and there. It is a complete reinvention of society. And one of the most famous thinkers on this, Samuel Huntington, had a perfect word for it: a totalizing process.
Just think about that word for a second, totalizing. It's incredibly powerful. What Huntington meant is that modernization doesn't just change one thing, it changes everything. It's this interconnected wave that sweeps through and transforms it all, leaving no stone unturned, from how families work to how the national government operates.
And this shows you exactly how that wave works. It's like a chain reaction, a cascade. It starts with people moving from farms into cities to get jobs in new factories. That's your urbanization and industrialization. Well, once they're in the city, the old religious authorities from the village have less influence, which leads to secularization. And as all these people get more educated and connected through newspapers and radio, they start demanding a voice in their own government, and boom, that's the rise of political participation. You see, each step just naturally leads to the next.
Okay, so if this process is so totalizing and massive, how in the world do we get a handle on it? Well, the easiest way is to break it down into 4 core dimensions. You can think of them as the 4 faces of this enormous change. This table lays it out perfectly. Economically, you go from just growing enough food to feed your family to producing crops and goods for a huge market. Socially, your whole identity shifts. It's not just about your family or your tribe anymore. You start seeing yourself as part of something bigger, like a company or a profession. Intellectually, knowledge just explodes thanks to rising literacy and mass media, and people start to believe that progress isn't just possible, it's a good thing. And all of this is what fuels the political change, the creation of a modern government with a strong national identity.
So, we've got the theory, but what does a politically modernized country actually look like on the ground? Well, we can split the answer into 2 big chunks: how it changes the government and how it changes the people.
All right, first up, the state itself. The actual machinery of government goes through this radical transformation. It evolves from something pretty simple into something way more complex and way more powerful.
So here's how that happens. For starters, power that was once scattered all over the place with local chiefs or landlords gets sucked into one central spot, the national government. Then, the government itself gets more specialized. You don't just have a king making all the decisions. You get separate courts, a legislature, and specific departments for things like health and education. The state also reaches way deeper into your life. It's collecting taxes, building highways, running schools, and to do all that, it needs a huge professional administration, a bureaucracy that hires people based on merit, not just because their uncle is a duke.
But here's the thing. It's not just about the government getting bigger and more complex. The entire relationship between the people and the state gets fundamentally rewired. Modernization completely changes how citizens see themselves and what they think their role is.
So think about it from an average person's perspective. Your entire sense of loyalty shifts. You're no longer obeying a king just because he was born into it. You're following laws created by a legitimate government. You start to participate more. You vote, you might join a political party, you protest. And maybe the biggest shift of all, your main identity changes. You start to see yourself not just as a member of your village or your clan, but as a citizen of a nation.
Okay, so we've broken down what modernization is, how it works, what it looks like, but this all brings us to the big question. Why are we even talking about this? Why does a theory that's decades old still matter so much today?
Well, it matters because this framework helps us make sense of some of the biggest stories happening right now, from the explosive growth of new economic powers to the intense debates raging over national identity versus globalization. You know, for a long time, modernization was seen as this one-way street, this inevitable march toward progress. But today, in a world where tradition is making a comeback and technology is changing everything, we have to ask, is political modernization still the unstoppable force we once thought it was?